Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Women's Soccer Zone, the latest in our special one-to-one series. This week I was able to catch up with Orlando Pride and US forward Alex Morgan in New Orleans ahead of her side's 2 games against South Korea. We discussed her recent run of form with the Orlando Pride, as well as her developing partnership with Brazilian superstar Marta and her time in Lyon, of course, earlier on this year. Alex was excellent, so I hope you guys really enjoy this one. So without wasting any more of your time, without further ado, here's Alex Morgan.
So Alex, 2 games against South Korea coming up, one in New Orleans, one in Cary. The last time you played them was a couple of years ago. What's the sort of thing that you tend to get out of a game against South Korea? Very technical side, a side that likes to keep the ball. I think the last time you played them was a 0-0 draw in 2015. Looking at the games ahead, what are you expecting from that opposition?
For us, we've obviously looked at South Korea and how to beat them, how to break them down. But I think for us, it's just continuing the momentum with the national team in terms of having that feel good, feeling going into these games, just feeling more connected. Also, just the fact that the league just ended, it's continuing that fitness for the next month. Obviously, we have the games against Canada next month. So for us, it's more just like continuing to climb the mountain and feel as connected as we can moving into 2018, which is a big year for us in qualifying for the World Cup.
You said about that feel-good factor. You obviously scored 3 times in the last couple of internationals against New Zealand. In yourself, how are you feeling at this present time?
I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling sharp. I'm feeling informed. So right now, finishing off with successful 2 seasons in 1 from France to the US. I want to end this year on a high note. And so I think that for me, just continuing to execute chances these next 2 games or 4 games this year is going to be very critical for me and important for my confidence. But I would say that I'm in a really good place right now.
How much is that form down to competition that you're facing at the moment with the US setup? I know there's always been a wealth of talent in the forward line, but I look back maybe 5 years ago in that year when you absolutely tore it apart, let's be quite frank, and it was you and Abby that would more often than not be leading the line. Now it's not always guaranteed that there's going to be the same players in that forward line. How is that competition affecting the form at the moment?
I feel like earlier this year it was quite difficult because I felt like it was difficult to get a rhythm and feel that comfortability factor within the US. But at the end of the day, there really isn't going to be that guarantee. There's not going to be that comfortability factor. So for me, I need to bring my strengths to this team and just take advantage of the time that I get on the field. And I'm hoping I get a significant amount of time these next 2 games, because obviously all of us are very competitive. We all want to be on the field. I want to be playing 2 90-minute games, and I don't know if that's realistic because obviously the coaches are still assessing players and how certain players play with others. But I think it's just another 2 games for me to be able to continue this run and show that I could play not only 9 but also out wide as well.
Does that hunger come from maybe some of the frustrations that you had maybe earlier on in the year? We know that when you went to Lyon, you initially went there injured. There was a few phases this year where you had to have time on the sidelines. Now that you're, as you say, in form, feeling fit, is that hunger more because of the frustrations that maybe you felt earlier in the year?
I wouldn't say that it's based on some of the frustrations that from earlier this year. I feel like this year has been a really good year, even with the injuries. I felt like if I wasn't getting what I needed out of the national team, which was limited time earlier this year, I felt like I was getting what I needed out of my club team. So I felt like it was a really good balance. And now with the league ending and only having the national team, I want to solely focus on this until the end of the year. It's just important for me to finish off 2017 on a high note. And so for me, it's just continuing to feel good and continuing to feel like I'm improving. I'm continuing to feel like I'm progressing as a player and continuing to make my mark on this team.
You talk about trying to finish on a high in 2017. Looking at the domestic form as well with Orlando, I mentioned there the streak that you had at the end of the season. I think this year was the best return in an NWSL season since it first started. How much of that is down to the environment and how comfortable you were in Orlando and the players that were around you as well?
I think the environment was key. Last year was very difficult because being an expansion team, we didn't quite have the quality because we were trying to just get a roster of players. And so this year we actually, Tom did an amazing job bringing a good amount of players into this team with Marta, with Camila, Alana Kennedy, Ali Krieger, Choma. The list just continues. So, and those are starters. Those are players that make a huge impact. So, being surrounded with top players in the world was great because I was getting that sort of service and that I wasn't really getting last year. And I'm not a player that is going to take on 2, 3, 4 defenders. I find myself in good spaces. I make sure that my timing is good, and I make sure when I find myself in those spaces and I'm given the ball that I put it in the back of the net. So I think with the players this year on Orlando, I feel like it was able just to fit really well, and the transition from France to Orlando was pretty smooth.
We're going to talk about France in a minute, but you mentioned there a lot of players that came into the club. Marta's move obviously attracted a lot of attention. It meant that you were reunited with her, obviously had time in the WPS with Western New York Flash. How excited were you when she joined the club, and that connection that you guys seem to have this year was almost a continuation from that time that you had 6 years ago. That was really key as well this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd say that this year when I learned that Marta signed with us, I wasn't sure how our partnership would work. I wasn't sure how much we would feel that connection in 2011 playing for Western New York. We won the WPS Championship, but it was also World Cup year, and I was pulled away from my club team as well as she was for that World Cup. So I feel like I didn't really get a good chance to develop this sort of on-field relationship with Marta. So this year I was hoping to really establish that, and obviously it needed to be pretty quick, given I was coming into season late. And I feel like it was quick, and it was smooth and fluid, and it happened a lot easier than I had anticipated. I thought it would be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more rushed, but it wasn't. It just happened smoothly on the field organically, and as the season went on, we just kind of knew exactly where each other were on the field, and that always helps, when you know where Marta is and you know that she wants to get the ball to you. You just need to make yourself open.
So it must mean that you're, let's say, pretty enthusiastic about the coming season in 2018. I'm sure Tom is going to look to make some reinforcements. Came so close to reaching the championship game. I guess that looking at what you've got in Orlando, you must be pretty happy and pretty enthusiastic about it, looking forward.
Yeah, I think it's been quite the turnaround from last year to this year, and I think that there's just going to be a couple fine-tuning things, but this team, had a great turnaround this year, and it was so great to come into a team that really accepted me as coming late to the team, even though I had a good foundation to be with them last year. I felt like coming in late, it was a really great reception, and that I feel like we're only going to continue to do better next year. And with that, I feel like Orlando is an extremely professional environment. We have everything that the men's side get. We have great training facilities and meals before and after trainings. We have access to gym and anything that we need. We have all the resources to succeed. So I think with that, you just see a lot of players around this league and internationally that want to check it out, that want to maybe play in the U.S. in the most professional environment, and you do get that in Orlando.
Because that's important, isn't it? We've got Heather O'Reilly and Crystal Dunn over in England at the moment, and I've spoken to both of them extensively, and one of the things that they've spoken about quite a lot is the facilities and the professionalism of the teams that they're at. They have everything on the same campus, they have everything in the same place. Is that a sign of where the NWSL is now, especially with the club that you're at, where players are now almost treated the same as everyone else, and they have that facility and they have that equipment and everything else that they need all in the same place, so it makes your lives a lot easier. You can just focus on the football and don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah, I think that's important, and it doesn't happen with every club team in the NWSL. Obviously some are missing certain things on the more like coaching side, some are missing things on the more organizational side or the more front office side. So I feel like in Orlando we kind of have all of those pieces, and it's just great to be a part of a club that is competing with all of the European clubs, is competing with the top clubs in the world, and they're providing that for their women's side. It's awesome, and I'm really happy to be a part of it, and I think people are recognizing this, and they're pushing the bar for the other NWSL teams to continue to increase standards as well.
You mentioned you came late to the team. That was as a result of a short spell that you had in France with Lyon. First question I've got to ask, I asked you in France when I was there, how did the French come along in the end?
Yeah, it was all right. It was very difficult initially. I learned to get by. I think the most difficult was the coach not speaking English and me not speaking French. That was probably the most difficult part of it, but my teammates helped me out so much, and I learned a little bit of French, but when you're removed from that for only a month, 2 or 3, you start to already forget so much. It's crazy.
You're going to be brave enough to give me a line that you might have had to use a little bit over there?
I mean, we'll see. Yeah, we'll save that for later. But I'll say that there was certain lines that I stuck to because my vocabulary was quite thin.
Better than mine, I'm sure. But there was a lot of attention when you made the move over there. Difficult start. A lot of attention on you. I think it took a few games to get your first goal. I think it came in the Coupe de France against Rodez. I think it was a brace in the game, in the cup game. When you are in that environment and when all the attention is on you, you're used to attention, of course you are, but you're going into a new country. The American fans are looking, the French fans are looking, everyone else around the world who follows women's soccer saw that move happen. How did you deal with that? You're in an environment that's new to you, different players, different atmosphere. You're looking for your first goal for the club, looking to impress. Did it get difficult at any time, or did you just try and block everything out and focus on what was ahead?
I tried to just focus on the simple things. Obviously, I knew I was coming into a team with Eugenie Le-Sommer and Ada Hegerberg being the forwards that they've looked to for quite a few years. So for me, I wasn't expecting them to come in and give me 90-minute games right away and change the formation to having a 3 front with me, Ada and Eugenie. But obviously, I wanted to make my mark. So there was expectation for myself, and there was also a time crunch in that as well. So I feel like it definitely took like a month for me to adjust, and obviously having FIFA breaks were difficult too because I wasn't able to get in a rhythm without that being interrupted with national team games and coming back to the US for those sort of camps. But I feel like once Champions League started, and I think it was March, I feel like there was games twice a week, and it was making sure your body was healthy enough to play in that next game. It was managing time on all the players, and I felt like I was able to get that sort of rhythm once things started to go a lot quicker.
One of the criticisms of the French league is how kind of top heavy it is. You've got Lyon, PSG, Montpellier, Paris FC as they're known now, JVC they were last year, who can hold their own in certain games. How did you find the difference in level when you're playing against a Montpellier compared to maybe an Albi who kind of finished near the bottom of the league? Because I think that's one of the questions that maybe people are interested in, because from one game to the next the level is so different. How do you deal with that as a world-class striker? Because you know that preparation is maybe going to be a little bit different against some of the bigger sides. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that was something that I was a little surprised with, because you had quite a few of competitive games, but you had to wait for us to play PSG or Champions League matches. So you didn't really get that week in and week out. And in some ways, it was nice because you had a break before an important game like maybe we had against Wolfsburg or Man City. But then you look at just continuing to improve as a player, as a team, and wanting to challenge yourselves going into like Champions League match. And it was very difficult to try something out in a match that is not very challenging at all. I would say that's something that I would have hoped for the French League I would hope the French League improves on in the coming years, because that was pretty difficult week in and week out to get those 5-0, 8-0 wins. So I also would say like the environment, the facilities in some of those teams, obviously weren't at the standard of Lyon, and totally understandable in those situations. But I do see, huge differences between the NWSL and the French League, and I think that both leagues could learn a little from each other. But
Such as?
I think that there's this sort of even playing field in the NWSL. Every single week, any team could be any team on any given day. The facilities are more leveled. They're just more even across the board. There's standards that U.S. Soccer imposes on the league, and there's this sort of front office that imposes standards, fines for facilities or anything not being up to standard. And I think that I don't think the French league is as organized. It's been standing longer than the NWSL. And obviously the salaries at teams like Lyon and PSG are much higher than salaries in the NWSL, but they're all bunched into those two teams. So I would say that's kind of the biggest difference. And obviously they have Champions League to look forward to, so those are where you're going to get those competitive matches. But in a 10-month season, you can't just count on 5 or 6 matches to be to have as competitive. So I would say there's certain things I love about the French League and certain things I love about the NWSL, and it'd be great to have that all in one.
I know you loved your games in UEFA Women's Champions League. We obviously chatted to you when you played Wolfsburg in the quarterfinals. You had, and we spoke about it in Lyon, slightly different roles. You played out wide, you played through the middle. Has that played a part in your development, and did you get what you wanted from the time in Lyon in terms of development? I know that was a big thing for you. You said before you joined the club that you wanted to go there and you wanted to be a better player, you wanted to develop as a player. Do you feel that you got everything you wanted from the time in Lyon, and if so, why?
Yeah, I absolutely feel like I got what I wanted out of Lyon. I felt like it was, what I went there to do was to continue developing as a player, was to try a different style, was to challenge myself. I feel like I did all 3 fronts, and in that I felt like I was challenged to play a different role on the team, play a different position, learn on the fly with the language barrier, and with some Champions League matches that I hadn't, with teams I hadn't ever faced before. So it was very challenging week in and week out, but I felt like it definitely made me a better player, and it opened my eyes up a lot to just the different styles of football and the way that the European leagues are formatted and ran differently than in the U.S. I feel like it was a really important step for me. I don't think it would be fair for me to play my entire career in the U.S., and this was really the perfect time for me to explore another option, and I'm really glad I did that.
It might be a difficult one to answer, and I completely understand if it's something you don't want to cover, but the final, obviously you started, you had I think 20 odd minutes and then had to go off with injury. There were question marks because you'd worked very, very hard to get fit for that final. You missed the final of the French Cup. I understand that probably must have been disappointing as well, but did you really feel physically ready for that final? Because there are some people that suggest maybe you were forced, or played despite the fact you were still maybe had a knock. Because obviously going off so early, it must have been very, very difficult, and I'm sure very disappointing. But when you look back on it now, were you ready for that game?
Going into that game, those first 20 minutes, I felt really good. I felt like I had good touches on the ball. I felt like just we were dominating, and from the first minute. And then when I got injured, that really sucked. I did feel like I was ready. However, I felt like there was a slight percentage that I could re-injure myself. You know, it was definitely rushed as much as it could be in order to get myself healthy. But I think at the end of the day, I've thought through this a lot, and at the end of the day, I would do it the same way because I felt ready at the time. We had done so much between myself, the doctors, and the trainers of Lyon. And I was training full 100% without limitations for 3 days, I believe. So in that moment, if I would have chosen not to play because of that slight chance of risking re-injuring myself, I think I would have forever regretted that, you know, and I would have never known. So, you know, I do feel like I could have gone 60 or 90 minutes. And obviously it didn't end up that way, but I would do it the same way if I had to again.
You ended up with a medal at the end of it, so still all good, and 3 trophies from your time in France, winning every competition. Did that play a part in deciding not to go back? You'd won every competition, you'd had a few games under your belt, you'd scored a lot of goals, got the development that you felt that you needed and wanted. Did that play a part as to why you decided to come back and stay in the NWSL next year?
When I got a lot of questions before the Champions League final about whether I was coming back or not, you know, I didn't know. I was leaning towards not coming back because I, you know, have just a great situation in Orlando with my husband and myself playing for the same organization and it being such a professional environment and club. However, I knew that that decision would have been harder if we didn't win Champions League. I went there to not only improve myself on the field, but to come back with hardware, to come back with Champions League medal, to be a European champion. And so I think if I wasn't able to accomplish that, I don't know where my head would be right now, but it definitely, I would say, it made the decision easier for me because I did what I went to do.
And you must have a similar feeling now, obviously, now that you're staying in Orlando, and I mentioned earlier, coming so close to the NWSL Championship game, that must be the focus now for you in 2018. It's picking up that hardware with Orlando and giving that organisation its first title.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we have 2 years till the World Cup, and I know that US Soccer and the NWSL are working hard in order to have the national team players stay in the NWSL and play all of the games in the NWSL rather than pulling them out for such a long time period. And I really appreciated that this year. As I came back, I didn't have to miss any games because of national team commitments, and so I felt like I was just even more committed to Orlando, and I feel like we have an amazing team. I mean, we have Marta, we have, you know, these amazing players on the team. I feel like we're definitely championship worthy, and so next year is definitely our year.
And US Women's National Team will finish off, obviously, you mentioned there, 2 years until the World Cup. When you look at the squad around you, when you look at the players around you, how confident are you that you can, I think retaining your title is probably a little bit early to speak about, but how confident are you that this team is in the right place and heading in the right direction?
I think we're heading in the right direction. I do think there's a lot of young talent on this team that haven't been a part of a major tournament thus far. Obviously, the World Cup qualifiers are going to be the biggest tournament that they'll have played in to date, other than maybe the NWSL Championship. So I think that youth hopefully will be able to grow into a really stable and confident team that we feel can get that title back again in the World Cup. But this is a very different team from 2015, so we are continuing to build, and I think by the time fall of 2018 rolls around in a year, we should be fine-tuning things, but I think it's understandable to still feel like we're building in this team right now.
So big thanks there to Alex, giving a lot of her time in a very busy schedule. Really appreciate the time that she was able to give us. Thanks very much to listeners, as always, for tuning in.